In recent years, a derisive phrase, 低头族, has been growing in popularity in Taiwan to describe a generation of young people with their heads buried in their phones, oblivious to the world around them. The visual, the tribe of bowed heads, while powerful, does not tell a complete story. Our technology and social media do sometimes separate us, but at other times, they serve as connective tissues across distances, helping us better our society together. In Taiwan, these connections make social media a powerful force for democracy. Thus, we stand resolved that in Taiwan, social media is beneficial for democratic values. Our contention is activism. Social networks have been vital for activism in Taiwan for two reasons. The first is attention. Conventional media does not fairly cover activist claims. Social media allows them to spread alternative messages to get the public on their side. Mirella Suga, media researcher at Central European University, explains in 2018 that the Sunflower Movement extensively relied on online platforms to document occurrences and keep participants visible because they felt underrepresented by international media. The second reason is crowdsourcing. Social media enabled student protesters to pool resources and sustain their operations over time. Bo Yu Chen and Dachi Liao, professors at National Sun Yat-sen University, wrote in 2014 that the legislative yuan was occupied and students were in need of resources. Crowdsourcing was an example of horizontal cooperation. It provided Wi-Fi, information, and network management. The movement also used crowdsourcing for news releases. This made it possible to utilize the internet in coordinating labor. The combination of these factors is what made the Sunflower Movement so incredibly successful. Mirella Suga continues from earlier in 2018, writing that the CSSTA never finalized. The KMT lost power. It was the tech of the movement that contributed to its remarkable success due to organization and coordination. Now, why are activism and civil rights such important democratic values? We'll identify two main reasons. First, this activism is effective. Polls show that student movements organized through social media actually make society more supportive of democratic values. Lee et al., a group of social media researchers from Australia, wrote in 2018 that there was an upward shift in democratic values after student movements in treated societies, whereas LDV is declining in control societies. The differences actually get larger after the student movement in Taiwan. Second, activism itself is a democratic value. Activism represents people making demands on their government to change unpopular policy. This is the essence of democracy and government for the people. In particular, activism on social media represents a new form of democratic value. GovZero, which was the technology side of the Sunflower Movement, calls this idea liquid democracy, which is the only form suited to the information age. Shannon Liao, cited earlier, continue writing that democratic governance in the information age places stress on horizontal connection. This fits GovZero's liquid democracy, in which people contribute ideas in a process of collaboration without coordination. The conclusion is inescapable. For Taiwan citizens looking to weigh in on the future of their society and how they're governed, social media is an irreplaceable tool to gather resources and amplify their message. This benefit to democracy far outweighs the downside. Thank you.
Proponents of social media tell a powerful story. They describe a dark age of communities divided, brought together for the first time through the power of the internet. A dream of unity and progress driving society into the future. Unfortunately, social media is less a dream than it is a nightmare, one with massive stakes for the future of the democratic project. Thus, in Taiwan, social media is not beneficial for democratic values. Our contention is fake news. Social media expands the spreading of fake news, threatening democracy for two reasons. First, voter misinformation. Social media spreads falsehoods, misleading voters. Media platforms are poorly suited to respond. Tai-Ling Wang, professor of journalism at the National Taiwan University, wrote last year, Taiwan voters uncertainty became a psychological state when consuming false info during elections. Taiwan is massively attacked by fake news. When people encounter info hard to verify, they turn to people who had a higher social status. Voters spread fake news. Voters believe info that confirms pre-existing beliefs, which might be false. Next, social media is the greatest disinformation risk. Algorithms amplify and target disinformation to those who are most susceptible. Catherine Chen, professor at Shaanxi University, and Ryan Wen, researcher assistant at LSE, explained in 2019. Cambridge Analytica and Facebook were secretly used to customize political rumors and project them to suspective audiences. Likewise, Taiwan's fake news has grown standardized with algorithms. Massive propagation employed a few accounts, most of which were bots. 60% might be unaware of algorithms. Users shared stories regardless of ability to discern fake news, overclaiming knowledge and capability. Next, an informed electorate is vital for democratic values. Hollier et al., journalism and politics professors at several US universities, wrote in 2019, democracy is less likely to survive in poor information. Poorly informed voters elect incompetent, corrupt, or self-dealing governments. Such outcomes lower confidence in democracy. Second is legal controls. Fake news emboldens the government to intervene in the marketplace of ideas, which greases the wheels for authoritarianism. Chung wrote in 2018, think twice before bringing back thought police. A proposal to amend the National Security Act was worrying because revised statutes could tighten control of media and freedom of speech. Many agree there is a need to tackle fake news. They are also concerned the government is defining exactly what constitutes a false report, who should oversee, and how perpetrators would be punished. It may be used to block reports critical of government, a tool to stop dissent. Don't be seduced by utopian descriptions of a social media that could be. Instead, we must grapple with the social media that actually exists. Regrettably, this means acknowledging that the social media experiment has failed and that its harms for democracy have outweighed its benefits. Thank you.
Exactly right. And with that, Shanna, do you mind if I ask the first question? All right. In your Hollier evidence, you said the problem with fake news is that it increases distrust in democracy by making people elect incompetent and corrupt politicians. So if that's true, you must be saying Tsai is incompetent and corrupt. Is that correct? And if so, what is your basis for saying that?
I'm not saying necessarily that any one specific politician is corrupt. So I would not take a stance currently right now on Tsai being corrupt or uncorrupt. What I am saying is it creates the possibility for corrupt politicians to be elected and to take office, which could then further corrupt a country or turn a positive country into a negative situation. My first question is, why does this group you talk about, GovZero, let me re-ask that question. What does GovZero mean by liquid democracy, and how is that the same as what democratic values would be?
So liquid democracy is a democratic value for the 21st century because it's horizontal rather than vertical. So what they mean by that is that lots of people can contribute instead of having this hierarchical and rigid kind of government. So the public has way more of a say in how they're ruled. And to me, if that's not democracy, nothing is.
Can I have a follow-up to that?
Sure.
So how is this, how would you claim that a lot of people participating, which means that fake news could get out there easier? How is that best for democracy if it means that people are being disinformed?
Well, I have two responses to that. One is it begs the question of your contention, which we'll dispute in a second. But two is that the impetus behind your question is a similar impetus to the one that says, oh, the public shouldn't have a say in how they're governed because the elite knows best, the experts know best. And that might be a different value system or a different form of government, but that's not a democratic value. That's a profoundly authoritarian value that says the people shouldn't have a say in how their lives work. All right. We have 6 responses to their fake news contention. First, there is no impact to their contention. Fake news does not affect election outcomes. People do not change their votes because of it. Nick Aspinwall, a journalist based in Taipei, wrote in 2019 that experts say it is unlikely that Chinese influence played a significant role in the DPP defeat in 2018. While users made significant efforts, the seeds of discontent had already been planted by policy failures, leaving them eager to punish an underperforming party. Second, our activism contention turns their fake news contention. The alternative to social media is not a utopia where everyone knows anything and the news is purely credible. It's media monopolies, which are equally likely to spread misinformation, but are less accountable because nobody can call them out. That's our Suga evidence from our contention. And Mark Harrison, senior lecturer in Chinese studies at the University of Tasmania, elaborates in 2015, saying that activists, in alliance with journalists and other civic groups, began a campaign against the concentration of media in Taiwan. It targeted Want and argued that media had a mission to sustain democracy through a diversity of opinions. Activists carried out their campaign across social media, such as Facebook, creating an alternative commons with democratic ideals. And that outweighs their impact because TV and mainstream news actually spread more fake news than social media does. Tylee Wang, professor at the Graduate Institute of Journalism at National Taiwan University, wrote last year that TV news remains the most significant sources of election information for Taiwan. Disinformation originated from China's media, CTI TV and China Times. When disinformation was covered by mainstream media, it was particularly likely to disseminate. 3, no disinformation link. New social media platforms such as Polis are solving the fake news crisis. Carl Miller, research director at the Center for the Analysis of Social Media, wrote last year, how could Taiwan listen better? The problem was information. Elections were infrequent and votes split the public. The answer was Polis, a social media platform. As people expressed views, it gave visibility to those finding consensus across huddles. Divisive statements you simply couldn't see on the app. If you gamify consensus, you expose hidden points of unity and create outcomes that the government can actually act on. 4, their contention is non-unique. Fake news does not spread through social media any more than other forums. During the Black Plague in the Middle Ages, there were conspiracy theories about ethnic minorities spreading disease. During the Spanish flu, people said doctors were trying to make money off of medicines and were fabricating the crisis. Fake news is nothing new. Social media is just a new place where an existing problem can be seen. 5, there is no legal controls link. Legal controls are not to be feared. They are very effective in preventing misinformation and they're not repressive. Walter Kerr, a US diplomat, wrote in 2020 that Taiwan takes a whole of society approach to disinformation. It works with social media. Rather than playing whack-a-mole, it highlights consensus. Media literacy trucks go to educate people. Taiwan is far ahead of other liberal democracies in fighting disinformation. Sixth, and finally, there is no impact. History proves fake news in Taiwan has not made people distrust democracy. Social media exists in Taiwan now, and trust in democracy is also high. This historically proves that their contention is incorrect. Thank you.
In response to the affirmative or the pro team, we would like to start first in response to their information helping social movement spread. Our first response is that information is not what helps social movement spread. It's the attention the social movements get. Social media creates attention in the short term, but undermines it in the long term. Tufekci in 2017 wrote, China has a 50-cent party. They do not respond to criticism. Instead, this party posts on unrelated topics to create alternative focal points, to create appearance of something important. This makes sense if attention rather than information as the key, as social movement needs. Without attention, information means little. Juvenal wrote about how demands would be diluted by bread and circuses. In the 21st century, the same dynamics hold, but the circus is online. Next is that social media fails to promote democratic values. Who in 20 explains, the speed afforded by protest is as much its peril as its promise. Spontaneous movements are prone to tactical freezes. They are often leaderless and lack the culture and the infrastructure for making decisions. Third, social movements in Taiwan do not by themselves create democratic values. Fillion in 2010 explains, challenges and contradictions characterize Taiwan's social movements. While freedom to protest has been won, be it low wages, environmental degradation, discrimination, suppression of local cultural practices, people can be rallied under democracy. However, many concrete grievances are still aggravated in spite of the democratic institutions. Activism is not enough. Finally, governments work to undermine social media or social movements in order to break them down. We can look to different histories, such as in the United States, where the CIA will infiltrate social media groups in an effort to break them apart and segment them so that they fail. Just because this happened in the 60s and the 70s does not mean that it can't also happen here in Taiwan and online. China's 50-cent party proves that this ability and this tactic of breaking apart social movement groups is alive and well in Taiwan and working, meaning that all of the arguments the pro team is giving you do not apply. They have no relation and no impact on the round today because they can't solve long term. Thank you.
Go ahead, because I had the first question last time.
You go ahead, because I am blanking on a question at the moment. I have to review my notes.
Okay. My question for you is, you said that social movements are doomed to fail in Taiwan because of disinformation like the 50-cent party. The 50-cent party existed while the sunflower movement was around. How did they succeed? I mean, they clearly did.
Okay, so a couple of things. One, my first response to that question is, one example of success does not mean success for all other instances in the future. There is a very easy chance that there could be more and more groups that are created, more and more misinformation bots that are created in the future to challenge new social media movements that start, because China now knows that the sunflower movement was successful. So they will, if anything pops up again, they will act to quickly quell that by having even more groups doing misinformation. And then the second thing is that the sunflower movement has been successful in the short term, but we don't know how long these successes are going to last. And if they're going to, or if they're going to be like reversed or overturned or changed in the future for the negative. So it's a lot, it's safer to overall to avoid social movements on social media. Does that answer your question?
We'll return to this issue later.
So my question for you is a trust in democracy the same as democracy being successful and being a true philosophical democracy?
I'm not sure I completely follow what you're getting at. Like, are they literally the same thing? No, they're referring to different ideas. Like, trust in democracy is not sufficient for democracy to exist. The reason I was bringing up trust in democracy is because that's the warrant in your Hollier evidence for why fake news undermines the sustainability of democracy, the institution. But no, you're right. They're not literally the same thing.
Okay.
Before I get into the line by line, activism outweighs informed electorates. They never contested our argument that activism is the essence of democracy. Activism is the act of people making their voice heard and affecting government policy. There's nothing more core to democratic values than that. So even if you think social media creates both activism and fake news, vote pro, because activism matters more. First, they say there's no link because social media's attention span is very short. We have 4 responses to this. First, the warrant or the evidence provided by this card is about China's 50-cent army. It's not about disinformation in Taiwan. So that does not apply to our evidence, which is about the sunflower movement. That matters more for the resolution, which is about the effect in Taiwan. 2, prefer our Suga evidence. It's newer and it assumes the 2018 midterms, which was a milestone for fake news and disinformation in Taiwan. The evidence is from 2017. 3, even if information is not sufficient, it is at least necessary. And we have shown that social media creates that foundation that effective social movements can historically build on. Finally, empirics. Despite their argument, the sunflower movement was successful. I explained that in the Crossfire. Second, they say social media-based activism fails because it's unsustainable and horizontal. Our Chen evidence says horizontal social movements are good. They're actually more sustainable because there's no organization to collapse. The social movement can adapt and mutate to new situations. Also, their evidence is about Black Lives Matter in the US, not about Taiwan, and we're the only ones with specific evidence about Taiwan. Third, they say social media movements do not provoke democratic values. This evidence is from 2010, before the sunflower movement, and it just gives some examples of social movements that have failed. But that shouldn't be the bar. Of course, some social movements will fail despite the advantages of social media, but social media makes them more likely to succeed, which history proves. I explained that earlier. Fourth, they give the CIA example. The CIA is not in Taiwan. What is the equivalent agency in the Taiwan government that is infiltrating social movements and killing opposition leaders? I can't think of one, and history proves that's not happening because social movements in Taiwan are very effective. Also, this is ancient history. It was solved by Snowden, which, guess what, set off a social movement coordinated through social media. Finally, they give the 50-cent army example again. I answered that earlier. Go on to their fake news contention. I'm just going to make one cross application at this point, which is I want to make a note that the third argument I made, which was about the Polis social media platform in Taiwan, answers all of their arguments about fake news on the other page. It solves the reasons why fake news would undermine social movements, because it's a platform where fake news is disadvantaged. The platform promotes consensus-based ideas instead of extremism and disagreement. That solves fake news because it brings forward ideas everyone can agree on, which fake news by definition does not apply to. So it solves any reason social media would be self-destructive for movements. Thank you.
All right, so to begin, first, Anthony says that there is no impact to fake news, that it does not affect outcomes and that votes are not changed. My first response here is that the impetus still exists, that the United States is the best example for how the social media creating false news, which then affects outcomes or affects parties and movements, happens and could happen in Taiwan. Which means that we need to be careful in Taiwan that we don't fall victim to what's happening in the United States with things such as the Tea Party that came about, the Pizzagate that happened, the storming of the US Capitol, which was completely organized through social media as well. Next, he says that activism turns fake news. This is not incorrect. Activism does not turn fake news. Activism can be born out of fake news and often is born out of fake news and fails or creates more problems. Anthony tries to convince you that it is this alternate commons of communication and community that creates democratic ideals. But it's also these alternative commons that create the scary, dark web areas of the world where people organize and create the parties or the groups that are meant to or try to overthrow well-meaning governments. Social media is not just Facebook and happy-go-lucky. It also exists in the deep recesses of Reddit and other websites that are harder to access for everyone unless you know how algorithms work, which I don't. Anthony claims that this outweighs the impact about TV and mainstream news spreading more fake news. And while this may be true, it is only possible for us to be able to really check what's going on in the traditional news source because it's much more accessible, because it's easier to watch TV than it is to access the internet at all times. It's easier to get a paper or see the headlines than it is to always be on social media and track everything that's happening on social media. Also, social media is ripe for the ability to just make a comment based on your own opinion that has nothing rooted in real factual logic that's occurring. This is exactly how Pizzagate happened in the United States. His argument about new platforms are solving the crisis is non-responsive, and it does not outweigh the fact that we have multiple scenarios where social media is actually, and new platforms through social media have created the ability to increase fake news around the world. Next, Anthony says that there's no impact because people don't distrust democracy. This is a big thing. Trust of democracy does not mean that that the democracy is a true democracy. It does not mean that the democracy is a good democracy or that it's actually happening. This is important for two reasons. Social media allows for us to be told misinformation. It is not just individuals, but governmental groups can use social media to spread misinformation about other political parties, to incite anger against serial policy failures, as Anthony so eloquently put it. Next, the social media can be used to try and create a world or a picture of a country where there is a democracy, but it's more authoritarian than democratic. Just because you trust that democracy is good does not mean that you live in a democracy or that your government is acting as a democracy. which means that we need to avoid social media. Anthony admits to this, that democratic trust does not equal democratic values, which means that social media has the ability to destroy. Finally, please remember when I tell you the government uses groups and individuals to infiltrate social media and to infiltrate movements themselves, to fracture them apart and make them fail. Longevity is the best way to view success of a movement. How long can something last, and how long does that change exist? Anthony keeps trying to cite the sunflower movement. We don't have enough information, enough time has not passed to know if they are actually going to be long-term successful in their movement, or if the Chinese government or other governments are going to be able to infiltrate, destroy, and make the sunflower movement look like a serial policy failure. Thank you.
Would you like the first question?
Yes, thank you. So you make the argument that Snowden has solved all of social media's, or Snowden has solved the government infiltrating social movements completely. Can you explain this and a little bit more about how that's actually true, that he solved it all completely? There's no infiltration ever.
Well, I was only responding to your example, which was about US intelligence agencies abusing their domestic authorities to infiltrate social movements. And that's been solved through the combination of the Church Committee, which spurred a variety of different protests targeting the abuses of power by J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI and the CIA. And Snowden was a social media oriented movement against the NSA, which also targeted the same kinds of abuses and worked because it spurred legislative restrictions on the government's ability to infiltrate social movements through the USA Freedom Act.
Thank you.
My question for you is, so you talk a lot about the importance of longevity in determining the success or failure of a social movement. It's been nearly 7 years since the Sunflower Movement came forward with its demands not to sign a trade agreement with China. Taiwan has not signed a trade agreement with China of the kind the Sunflower Movement was protesting. How long do we have to wait until we think that this was success?
Honestly, I can't give you an idea on that, because serial policy failure excuses are something that is used by different governmental organizations at different times. I would also argue that any free trade or traded deal that has been made with China has been some kind of disruption to the sunflower movement and is causing a little bit of insecurity in the trust of that the sunflower movement will continue to be successful.
Well, the current government is pretty hostile to China overall, no?
Yes, but that doesn't mean that they will maintain control in the next election.
So we should just write off the sunflower movement, because at some point 20 years in the future they might get rolled back?
I'm not saying completely write them off. I'm saying be skeptical.
Okay. Before we get into the line by line, extend my impact calculus argument. Shanna has conceded in the summary that activism is the main core democratic value. She draws some distinctions with trust, and she says trust isn't a core democratic value, but she never answers what is a core democratic value. Our answer to that is democracy is about people demanding change and therefore participating in the government process in their society. This doesn't have to work every time. The whole point of democracy is people will disagree with one another, and sometimes some groups will get ahead and other times other groups will get ahead. That's the beauty of the democratic process. Shanna's saying throw it out because sometimes social movements don't get all of their goals, or sometimes social movements wins get rolled back decades later. She says prefer longevity and be skeptical of government infiltration. She has no examples of government infiltration in Taiwan, which is a theme with many of her arguments. She has lots of examples about the US and other countries, but social movements in Taiwan are working. She says longevity should come first and that not enough time has passed. 7 years is plenty of time in my book. And there are many other examples, like gay marriage, that prove that the sunflower movement is not an isolated incident. But I want to flip that on its head. She assumes that social movements will get worse over time because bots will get better. The opposite could also happen, though. Social movements could get better over time by learning from the successes of the sunflower movement, and social media can get better at content moderation, which is proven by Polis, which has given us a model for how social media can avoid the pitfalls of the past. What this all really means is that none of the problems Shanna points out about social media are problems of social media. They're problems with bad social media, but social media is so indispensable for movement organizing through coordination, raising awareness, and promoting focus that it's not worth the trade-off, especially given how important activism is to the democratic process. Now, go on to Shanna's contention. I'm just going to extend two arguments here. First, I'm going to extend the second argument, which was the monopolistic news argument. The alternative to social media is not a utopia of truth. It's TV channels that are just as dishonest, but harder to check because there's no way for people to participate. Before social media was dominant in Taiwan, Chinese-sponsored news networks were providing the news. That is obviously worse. At least in social media, people have a chance to present the other side of the story, and Polis shows that problem can be solved altogether. Next, I want to extend the Miller evidence, which was my third argument. This was the piece of evidence about Polis. You can design social media to promote consensus instead of division. This is very easy to do. It can be done by Facebook. It's been shown to work around the world. Just because bad social media is bad doesn't mean all social media is. It can be good, and it's worth keeping around for the benefits of the democratic process. Thank you.
I want to start out with this. Anthony claims I'm saying that social media is bad and that we should throw it out completely. That is not my argument. I'm not arguing that social media should be abandoned because of fake news completely. I'm saying that social media should not be what we rely on to propagate, disseminate, and encourage democratic values because of the risk of how easy it is to spread fake news. First, we need to be wary of social media. China's 50 Cent Party, the storming of the US Capitol, which happened after Snowden, the Tea Party and Pizzagate, which happened after Snowden, show that social media extends the beliefs of fake news. And please remember, I tell you, and Anthony never responds to this, that social media is endless. There are too many platforms for someone or even a single person to be able to look at and check everything. Whereas at least with mainstream media, the number is smaller and it's more accessible. It's easier to pick up a newspaper than it is to always have access to every single social media site. This is why we should be using mainstream media for democratic values and for disseminating information, and especially when it comes to voting. Next, Anthony is touting the belief that Polis is amazing and has solved all of our problems. That is one example. Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, all of the other random, dark, small social media websites that exist that we may not know of because we are not within those social groupings are what allow for there to be fake news. There is an echo chamber that exists within social media where we're not checking things, we're just believing things, and we are making our opinions and other people follow them. At least with mainstream media, we can check them, we can look at them, we can compare two different news sources to each other because we know exactly where those two news sources stand. This means that activism can still happen in a world where social media is not the main focus. But activism online risks easy infiltration and risks being splintered by the government from infiltrated groups. China's 50 Cent Party proves this 100% to be true in Taiwan. Anthony can give you the sunflower movement all he wants. Fine, it's one example. but there are still so many policy public issues that are being waged and discussed in Taiwan that have zero potential to come true because of the divisiveness on social media and the fake news that's being propagated. Therefore, I urge you to vote con and to stray from relying on social media as the way to promote democratic values in Taiwan. Thank you.